Jane. So we're just waiting for Mary Kennedy. Mary Kennedy. My
Yay!
God, that was easy.
And it's Mercury retrograde.
Okay. Hiya, Mary.
Hi, Michael.
Looking beautiful, as always.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Nice to see you.
you too. You too. So I've been looking forward to this conversation with you, mainly because you're a bit of a legend, really.
Thanks.
So will we dive in?
Sure. Why not? It's a kind of
Okay.
dive in thing, isn't it? This
Kind of is, yeah, kind of
important
is.
conversation.
Yeah. So I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about it in at the end of the last conversation I had with Quiva Butterly, and we were talking about this idea of what activism is. What does it mean in our lives? What does it mean? What is it? And we all have grown up with ideas around it, and I suppose I would have grown up with the versions around it, really. Like even listening to, like, Ram Dass would be somebody that I love listening to, and Ram Dass would have talked about going to peace marches and them being the angriest places he's had ever been. And that's one piece that's always struck me, and Quiva talked into this a little bit last week around our relationship to anger.
Mm.
And I just went for a walk with a friend of mine, and we were discussing, the word civilized. We live in a civilized culture. That's been the word that has described what we've, created in the West, what we live in the West, civilization. Even those stories of, people going out into, Africa and Asia and Australia and America, and they bring civilization to these lost people, these people who needed to be helped. Um, so like a lot of, I feel like, where certainly this has been my experience, where I get stuck is the lens through which I see, and I think that Western lens has an aversion to those strong emotions, that strong piece, and particularly I would think for men. I think men in particular, and you can lean into this now and add your piece. That we like to keep things kind of, above the surface, or clean, or calm, or, settled, and anything that ruffles feathers or shakes things up is to be, in one sense, avoided. And we're at this point at which we need to have a conversation about that,
Yeah.
because we're seeing how this so-called civilized piece doesn't really add up to what it's kind of tried to tell us that it is. Um, and that piece around anger, that piece around anger, rage, which are inherent aspects of what we are in this human condition. They are a part of it. So we have a choice to either repress them, turn away from them, deny them, or begin to inquire, what's my relationship to this piece? How does this piece come up for me? What am I doing? Am I avoiding? Am I leaning in? Am I looking into it? Am I accepting it or denying it? And I think this activism, that this piece of what we're seeing in the world in terms of a galvanization of activism, we're seeing it, and a huge piece of that is not that this hasn't been going on, but we're seeing it in our phones now. I was just looking at a march in happening down in Cork, and so we're seeing so much more of this. So in one sense, it's unavoidable, and yet it's also, we're seeing it through this tool by which we often create a lot of avoidance in our lives and a lot of distraction in our lives. So if we were to, is there other words that come to mind when the word activism, if you sit with the word activism, what are other words associated with that come up for you? Like, what is it connected to? Because I've seen, and this is one of the reasons, sorry, and this is one of the reasons I wanted you in here, because I've kind of see, and again, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but I've seen you go from a place of maybe not speaking up to speaking up. I've seen you make that journey, and something in you seemed to have shifted or changed along that road. And I'm wondering what that piece was.
Well, let me go back to activism first to put it in the context of how I see it, which is just my perspective. As you say, like we all have different perspectives on it, really, or there's a lot of different perspectives on activism out there. So for me, like the word, it's, to act. If you look it up, I was looking it up today just for that very reason, to kind of put this into context. What is it that how do, how is it defined as such? And our definitions create our realities, really. So it's like taking action, for social or political change is the very kind of pretty narrow, but that's what activism is. So, but for me, the word has act, to enact, to take action. Um, and in the world right now, which is where civilization is really this, the word civilization, and another definition, as you say, to be civilized is to kind of to keep things under wraps, to keep kind of, stay on the surface. And, what we're seeing now in the meta crisis, or whatever you want to call it, the collapse of a paradigm of an old system, is collapsing because civilization does not work. Democracy, as we know it, isn't working. And so for social change, wow, we're being called into action. Um, and for me, on humanity and for the planet, we're definitely being called into action. And I suppose, speaking of my own journey from, your observation that I wasn't speaking up. I'm not sure, is that in the context of um, Gaza, or is it in the context of other things to speaking up? I mean, it's something I recognize very much in myself, and I can speak to that, but and anger is involved in that also. But I suppose what I'd really like to, or what I really sense, is that activism, that what we need right now is a new activism. I remember in the 1990s looking at Rwanda and going, like, I was just in my late 20s, and I was going, how are we humans repeating what happened in World War II, when that is a living memory? Like, this isn't a century later. And I just see now, I have the same question from October 7th, from 2 years ago, from what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, so countless places on the earth. Like, how are we humans repeating this over and over and over again? And what is needed is something very new, a new response, a new activism. So for me, that's the question I've held. How do we respond? How do I respond in a new way that will not feed the crisis that I'm trying to respond to even more? And that's been a big journey for me, because I grew up, I was listening to Quiva last week, and it was lovely. like she grew up so different to me. I grew up here in the west of Ireland in the 70s, 80s. I know in this pocket of the world, nobody really questioned anything, or most people didn't. So I grew up on the good girl side of the street. Anger um, was not welcome um, in this civilized, um, educated, over domesticated culture that I grew up in that as a woman in the 70s. And as you say, like the men too, absolutely have to button it down. But it was like, don't ask questions, you just accept. And when you grow up in that, you don't know anything else. So I didn't have a neurology, like my nervous system is a good girl's nervous system, or was. So for me to rage against the machine, I mean, I remember even like the punk, I was a Whitney Houston girl. I wasn't a punk, I wasn't into kind of punk music. They were kind of mad. So like all of that is like there was no, I didn't have the rebel in me.
Mm,
So I'm only speaking personally from this perspective because there are so many different perspectives and different ways in which we were brought up in the culture, the civilized culture. Some who were able, like who were really seeing what, were able to question and raise their voices. My journey has been one of, um, you know, seeing that activism. There's a whole spectrum of for me, from like deep inner work now all the way. That includes like my shadow work. How am I not showing up? How can I make sure that I'm not reacting and just perpetuating more of the patriarchal system? The separation, the uh, domination, all of that. That's from like one side of the spectrum all the way up to, speaking truth to power, and all the way up to standing in front of a tank, or getting on a flotilla, and that's what we're being called into. And I feel like it is, some of us, we have to look at that and say, okay, where can I be most effective? How can I be, take action that is most effective? But for me, I had to learn how to, um, I suppose, tolerate the utter discomfort of speaking up, because I didn't ever learn that.
mm,
And yet but I did learn a deep connection to suffering, and a deep, like, I had to do something. But my way would have been to go more towards that peace,
mm,
you know, rather than the stand in front of a tank, speak truth to power, because I just didn't have that in my makeup. And then the inner work, I had to do the inner work. Um, I realized, because I hope this is making sense, but
mm,
either side of that spectrum, if you take it to extremes, like if you stay in the inner work too much, you just spiritually bypass, you just become passive, you hide out there. And if you go take you know really taking action, you can end up in that burnt out, really reactive place, perpetuating, both actually perpetuate the what's happening, the what we're acting against, actually, or what we're taking action for.
mm.
So I don't know whether that makes sense, but for me, the anger piece was the hardest piece for me. I mean, um, I could feel the anger, but it felt, I didn't know how to take action from it without it in some way causing harm. So I don't know whether that's making sense, but
Yeah.
that's,
So
yeah.
yeah. So like I'm just interested in this in terms of in terms of a model, I suppose, in some sense. So I'm hearing what you're talking about, this a dance between these two places of one of the inner work, and then what happens on the outside in terms of your response to the world and to what's happening, and that being then informed by by inner reflection, by asking yourself, where is this coming from, what is this happening, what's my relationship to what's happening, how do I, like, I'm interested in that point at which you, let's say, put your first post out about Gaza, or about like, what was that point, do you remember?
Um, Not specifically, but I do remember I had to work very, I had to withdraw first,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
um, withdraw because I could feel the effect of it on me. And I was very, it's like, how do that level of suffering, what it was doing in terms of the powerlessness, the overwhelm, the disbelief, all of those things. So the first place I had to go was to be present to my own suffering so I could be more present to the suffering of others. And bear witness to me is the same thing as be present. So, it, you know, as the more that I could really be present, that is not like, it's not wishing them away. It's like, where is this showing up in my body? Where is this powerlessness? Where's my grief? So that I could then wisely step into what the wisdom for me comes from that place when I withdraw. Now, that's a very privileged place to come from, because that means I have to slow down, I have to withdraw. And a lot of people on the front lines are not, haven't got that privilege. There's an urgency, there's something that needs to be done. So again, we have to look at the full spectrum. And for me, I wasn't on the front line. I was very affected by what was going on, as so many of us were and continue to be. But my first, I really saw that I wasn't, I was spun out, and I had to come back to center if I
Mm,
was to really, as I say, that radical new activism asks us, I think, or requires that we don't come into reaction, that we're not disconnected from ourselves, number one.
mm,
Because when we are, we disconnect from everything. Like, we disconnect from the truth that we are all interconnected, but that has to start with me. So that's
yeah,
what I had to do. I had to withdraw and sit on my cushion and feel what was happening and move my body and go out to nature. And I mean, what I was doing was moving from fight, flight, freeze into rest and digest, which um, I needed in order for me to actually come back to center and allow the wisdom, whether that's speaking something or taking action, further action. Then when that comes from that that place of depth, and it's not that you get to this deep place of peace and that's you remain in this place of peace. Like, in the world we live in, we're moving in and out. But certainly my first step in activism is I come back in. I have to come back in.
mm,
I have to sit with what's here, what's true for me, to meet my suffering.
mm,
I am suffering seeing these people, seeing what's happening, seeing the genocide, seeing how humans are, what we're doing to each other, what we're doing to the planet. And that causes, what that's creating in my system is a lot of suffering. So it's not very popular to say, but if I have to, I have to come back to me. and find that place at the center where I have stability, which will give me resilience. So then I can be of use to in this world. I can take actions, and I have found over and over and over again that the wise action comes from that place in me. But I do know for a lot of people that they don't have that privilege of withdrawing. But if I can withdraw and build myself up and take action, and then if I have to withdraw again or come off the screen, you
Mm.
know, in order to stop this powerless overwhelm, um, absolute despair and grief for
But what,
moments.
like, so, like, I would think for a lot of people, getting to the point of witnessing what's going on and feeling overwhelmed by it, or feeling like it was too much and switching off and leaving it at that. I think that's where a lot of people end up, and they just get on with their, like, what in you brought you back to continuing that journey?
Well, I couldn't switch off. I mean, I couldn't. There's no way I can. I just, it's not in me. I
Like,
work, where I work is about, like, I hold a vision for a new world.
Mm,
That's the force of activism behind me. It's like I hold a vision that we are going to birth a new, and we are birthing a new world, a new system. And that, if I hold that vision, like, you know,
mm.
anyone who holds a vision, then I'll stand for that. That I'll walk that path. I'll stand at that edge. Um, and I don't have a choice really at this stage. If I hold that vision and it's so deeply ingrained in every cell of my body, um, then I have to be part of birthing that. And that means, that means
Yeah.
I have to,
Look,
I'm showing up.
and I suppose the difference is from having the experience of seeing this going on and kind of going, look, this is too much. I've got enough on my plate. And then what you seem to be doing, which is this inquiry, this self-inquiry as to what is going on within me, this dedication to really owning or experiencing or integrating what is coming up in you, as a process of maybe building a container then that is able to come back, step back with a you're continuously creating a more robust container, maybe a more robust nervous system.
Well, that's
But it's
been my experience. Yeah.
And would you say that that path, that step one on that path is that process of sitting with yourself, really learning how to sit with yourself, to sit with what's in the darkness?
For me, yeah, for sure. Come to move from somebody, who was very is civilized, on that, um, from my upbringing, um, so much of it that I'm so grateful for, but just in a culture that I grew up in here in Ireland, um, through those 70s and 80s, particularly 70s, 60s, 70s, um, I feel like that is my path. But it's not everybody's path, so I think that's the most important thing. It's like there's a time when I have to sit and there's a time when I have to act, but
Yeah.
I can only discern that action for me can only come from being in connection with my depths, being in connection with that discerning wise part of me. Because for me, the most important thing is that I don't repeat what other generations have done in how they've responded, in their activism. I believe we're really evolving how we are, what it means to be an activist in this world, because I think it's connected to also to an evolution of consciousness. Ken Wilber talks about, who is the great philosopher, talks about, we wake up, we grow up, we clean up, and we show up.
Hmm.
And that's for me, like we need to be ticking all of those boxes. Waking up so we can find our center. We can find that we connect, we are one with everything. Grow up, we develop ourselves, we become pattern breakers, we become, we um yeah, we shift our I suppose we stop. Yeah, we're paradigm breakers. We're developing ourselves. We're growing up. Um, Cleaning up is doing shadow work, so that you know if I am out there as an activist against conflict in the world, then where is it in my shadow?
Hmm.
Like, where am I causing conflict? And I've had this in my life where, because of what was happening on my screen, I decided I cannot continue a conflict that I had in my life, and I have to do something about that. So that's clean up, and then you show up. You show up as best you can as that activist, as with, and it's not like a linear thing. You're doing all of those things
Hmm.
as they arise
Hmm.
in this crazy world that we're all being, invited into all of those things.
And then, so maybe if the idea of activism and a broader scope as to what it is, and maybe on one end you have what we traditionally think of as activism in terms of people getting on the flotilla or standing in front of a tank or standing outside a consulate or and then on the other hand, and maybe this is more foundational in terms of what activism is there some sort of invitation call into sovereignty, into a deeper sense of our own felt identity, you know, like particularly, when we grow up in certain environments and we imbibe and become part of that, that environment. And as we're seeing now, so much of the institutions that we would have considered, in charge, running the show, doing what they're doing, are not what they appear to be. This idea the emperor has no clothes on, and beginning to inquire as to, well, how does that affect me? In like I was thinking about, I was having a conversation about COVID earlier with somebody, and we were talking about the idea of this deep sense or this deep desire to feel safe. It's a really deep piece to feel safe. And we'll grab at more or less anything along the road to develop that sense of, okay, I'm safe here, I'm safe here, I'm safe within myself. And a big piece that seems to be dropping away at the moment is a lot of what we could, I suppose we must call, outmoded ways of acquiring that sense of safety. So that they're being peeled away from people. And I can understand how that is a very difficult piece to process, and for most of us, for many of us, particularly in the culture we live in, a much easier piece to try and avoid, although that will create whatever issues it will create. So, as pieces that we've relied on to feel safe, I'm part of this culture, I'm part of this works this way, and these pieces are beginning to break up and not to be sustainable, not to be supportive. And we, in a sense, have to go back to that inner drawing board and begin to inquire, well, where is my sense of safety? Where is it in myself? Is it in myself? Is there a deep sense of unsafety that I need to feel and allow myself to feel? And there, in some senses, that process seems to be a version of activism. There's a radicalness in that our culture doesn't really do that. Our culture is, get this, get that, acquire
Yeah,
that. It's a consumer, keep busy, keep distracted. So that process of stopping, like, and I know you keep saying, well, this is what I do, this is what I do, but I wonder, is that a fundamental piece to the human condition, that there is some level of inquiry needed for our development, for our growth, for our evolution, for, you talking about holding this vision. And I suppose ideally more and more people holding that vision is what will create, in the same way anything is that has ever been created has been from a vision that has been ultimately shared.
I have a dream. One of the greatest activists. That's
Yeah.
what. Okay, he came from that place. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a group of people, and this is, and it's something, it's interesting, the things we kind of forget, because like so many conversations I've had with people, particularly around Gaza, because it's such a hot topic, is, is the that sense of there's nothing I can do, that sense of hopelessness in the face of what seems to be huge, what seems to be on the other side of the world, what seems to be, and yet any of these movements that have created change, be it the Irish Revolution, be it apartheid in South Africa, be it civil rights in America, has all started and created huge change by a small group of people going, no, this needs to be a different way. I
Yeah,
will not.
and
I will not comply.
absolutely. And I
And
think, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry,
well,
jumping in.
I'm wondering, that piece of I will not comply. I'm wondering what it is within a person that gets them to a place in which they say, what is it? You talked about that sense of being devastated, or that sense of that feeling of um, awakening to something within ourselves, what we've been avoiding within ourselves, deep felt experience. And then that being a process by which we get to then open to a greater sense of felt experience, in terms of connection, in terms of, right relationship, in terms of we are part of something, like that's, we live in this individualized culture where we've all been taught to, live in small, very, very small groups, if not alone, have four walls, and survive in that way. So I'm not sure there is a thriving in that way. There is certainly a surviving. And at its core, I feel activism is this invitation into exploring being part of something bigger, which I think initially for a lot of us, particularly in the West, there is a huge aversion to. It's like, oh, no, thanks. And yet, what I feel like I'm hearing you articulate is that this journey of turning inward, of beginning to sit with what it is that is that is coming up, so we're faced with an experience and it creates a reaction within us, and then we have this opportunity to explore that, to sit with that, which is again a radical act. It's unfortunate, it is, but it is a radical act to sit with ourselves. And maybe that is a way in which we become more human, more embodied, more here, more able to show up.
Yeah, I mean that piece you spoke about of being powerless. Like when I sit with my powerlessness, I absolutely become more human.
Mm,
Something in me, because I realize how I need connection. I need others. And a lot of this and what's happening is about disconnection,
mm,
is about distraction. Um, as things collapse, like things are collapsing. So we are very vulnerable. It's
mm,
very threatening. And
mm,
that's often what will bring us to take action, is that sense of my life as an individual is under threat. Unfortunately, that's what it seems to be taking at this point.
mm,
Um, Even at this point in our evolution, at this point in the world and humanity, it's like it's coming to our doorstep, like from all authoritarianism, genocide, um, wars, migration. Like it's all a global now.
mm,
We're all being affected. COVID, something that affected every one of us. That's when people, that's when we, not people, we take action mostly, particularly if we haven't been awake. I mean, for a lot of my life, I wasn't awake. It took a crisis in my life
mm,
to wake me up, because it is about a change of identity, being having to come out of an identity that is civilized, that is domesticated, that that gets its finds its safety in security, in money, in having the next piece of fashion. You know, I did all those things.
Mm.
I did all those things until a crisis came in my life, and 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 I had, I felt, you know, from falling apart to enacting.
Mm.
Because you find when you actually, when you go through something like that, like the world is going through, it's that great Kalyuk
Mm.
energy of the dark goddess. She has been suppressed for so long in all of us, no matter what gender you identify with.
Mm.
She has been suppressed, so she is rising and roaring, and she is bringing us back into connection.
Mm.
And it's actually taking action sometimes is how you will find connection, just as much as sitting and looking inward, because it's all about connection, and connection to nature, and connection to this great intelligence that we are all. But if I get lost in that, I won't take action.
Mm.
And if I constantly take action and don't connect to that great web of
Mm.
life that we're all connected to, then we'll burn out. So it's like we're in this dance, this new
Mm.
way of activism that is a dance between the I and the we, between the being and the doing, between the sitting and the taking action. You know, it's we're in this dance, and and can we, it's dynamic. It's not somewhere that we can land, really, in the everything changing in the world. So it's, I find, like, where am I in, where can I be a point of power in the world, in the cosmos, in this, at this time? Like, where can I put my energy and attention so that I can take action that will, that will have the an effect, you know, that will impact
Mm.
um, the whole system.
Mm.
So I don't know whether that's answering your
Yeah,
question.
and like and the piece behind that desire to take action, like the felt experience. Like, what's the felt experience behind wanting to participate in taking action, in speaking out, or whatever way? Like, let's say there's a myriad of ways that anyone in their own life can, like, what is that piece? How does one get in touch with that piece?
Well, I do
Right.
think, I mean, I think that it does come from a strong life force energy that is like anger or rage. That can certainly propel, but so can my sadness. My sadness, like, I can feel it already in my heart, like, but I can fall into that too much. So I have to,
Mm.
that's for me why the inner work is so important, because I want to, is that sadness something that's, if I don't work with, it will have me.
Mm.
It will have me. And I
Mm.
am no use to anyone if I'm in a heap,
Mm.
you know, for too long. And yet if the anger, if my anger comes, and it's like as my great teacher spoke once about, it's like a jagged edged sword instead of a very clean sword, then it's going to contribute more. It's going to feed the
Mm.
crisis, the
Mm.
separation, the you know, because
Mm.
that's what the system is doing. The system is dividing to and separating to conquer.
Yeah.
That's what it's doing. So for me, activism has to be about generative, about the pulling together, about looking, bringing things that have been separated by the patriarchy, fragmented by the patriarchy, um, within us and around us, about bringing it together.
Mm.
And that can be anything from a radical act of just going out and enjoying yourself in the face of what you see on your phone,
Mm.
as much as it is to, you know, to take action, to get on the street, as much as it is to sit and transmute your emotions, get them moving so they don't have you.
Mm. So this shadow piece, seems to be a very big piece in terms of beginning to, or trying to create a clearer container, and through that a clearer perspective on how to show up, and what's mine and what's not mine. And I know this, I have it as much as anyone, this, as strong emotions move through, I think certainly the environment I grew up in taught me to want to get rid of them, get them out of my system quickly, which is, just to project them onto something or someone, a situation or someone, or blame, or to try to which I've realized keeps me in the loop of not
Yeah.
actually healing that, and I think, what you've spoken into maybe around activism in bygone days, there was probably a lot of that going on in which there wasn't a foundation of self-reflection, in which we were able to let what needed to move through us, and there's a huge vulnerability in that as well. And I think, again, in the West, vulnerability, and like we talk about this a lot in the men's retreats, and Dermot always has a beautiful way of reframing it, that vulnerability really is what real strength is.
Mm.
This is what real courage is, and real strength. Being able to look at your own limitations, your own faults, your own issues, your own wounds, and sit with them.
Yeah.
And, I know in my own life, as I've done that, I've really had to meet the mechanisms and the systems I've created to defend myself from feeling those places, or being aware of those places. Like my ideas of being better than other people, or being perfect, or being, or the opposite of, falling into depression, or falling into all ways of just not meeting what it is that I was carrying around, what I'd inherited, what I was in my system, and created the lens by which then I saw myself, I saw life, I saw the world around me, I saw people around me.
Mm.
And at that slow process of, inch by inch, row by row, of beginning to meet those places and learning how to sit with them, and maybe the back and forth, and the fall down 8 and get up 9, and that messy journey that's not linear. That's not linear at all. And I also think it's important to note that for me, certainly, other people have said this to me, there's a modicum of madness in that journey, in that so much of how we defend ourselves and how we create a sense of ourselves is up here. It's not
Mm.
down here in the body. It's not a felt experience in the body. And this process of moving from here into the felt experience, where we hold so much of our own wounding, what we carry, and beginning to meet that. And it often flies in the face of what the egoic narrative is trying to defend us from, to keep us safe from. And yet, in that felt experience, like you've articulated, and this is my experience, was this deeper capacity to feel, whatever it might be it joy, but equally be it grief or rage, or, like a capacity to feel it. And as I felt into that, then there is this other piece around the commonality, or the connectedness, or the interwovenness, like mycelium networks that we're all part of, that is very subtle. And maybe we live in a culture that in some way has been orchestrated in such a way that it has tried to keep us unaware of that deeper quality of connection, like our right relationship in moving through the world and communicating, and with ourselves, with each other, with the day, with the night, with the um maybe that's what's we're being invited to wake up through these, like you spoke about, like suffering, and like the suffering has been the greatest teacher in my life. And I'm, like, I had to be broken,
Mhm.
because what in me was protecting me and keeping me separate and holding my vision back was so well orchestrated and so robust and so devious and unconscious and unseen that unless I actually died, you know, I wasn't going to see it. I wasn't going to see it. And that's a huge ask.
Well, that's what it's about, though. I mean, we're taking action, whatever that may be on that spectrum, in order to break those patterns on an individual level, on a cultural level, on a political level. Um, that's like we've all been so conditioned, and we're just seeing it now, I sense.
Mm,
And so that's
mm,
what our activism has to be is about, not has to
mm.
be about, but I feel is about breaking this up now, breaking it up,
Yeah.
shattering, unraveling.
Mm,
And in order for to do that on the collective level, on the cultural level, on the political level, we have to do it within ourselves.
mm,
And that's part of helping each other, or walking alongside each other is
mm.
part of that.
And I suppose there's like absolutely, I think part of the experience, part of that dropping in, that meeting ourselves, I think for all of us, in coming into this human experience and coming into a separate finite form, there is that deep aloneness. Like that's part of what, and yet what I've also really felt supported by and felt part of, particularly since I've started to connect with people around this piece of activism and people who are really trying to come from a place that is, like you say, has that. They're learning the steps of their own dance, where they can include their inner landscape and they're evaluating it and they're feeling it and they're showing up with that work, doing that work. That sense of being part of, it's like a deeper sense of humanity. It's a deeper sense of connection, a deeper sense of intimacy. Part of it
Yeah,
is because I have a deeper sense of intimacy with myself. I'm working that muscle that has been stagnant. And
bound, not just stagnant,
yeah,
bound.
bound for
I
sure.
mean, we were persecuted for speaking as women. We were, we there were witch trials, and men had the same.
Mm,
In different ways. We are all, as Carol Gilligan, the great Carol Gilligan says, we're all victims of the patriarchy. And we, speaking of systems and patriarchy and all that can get us kind of out of,
mm,
I'm aware that that can kind of get you out of, it's kind of much broader, but like the genocide in Gaza is as a response, as a result of patriarchy. The climate, like what we've done to the planet, is as a result of patriarchy. What's happening in Ukraine, in the States, what's happening on our streets here, have been happening. This, people who they're activists from a different perspective. That's what we also have to remember. We have our own view of what activism is for better social good, but there are other perspectives,
mm,
and they are acting as activists. So that's where it also gets very, it's harder to look at.
mm,
I don't know whether I make sense, but like there's a lot of worldviews, there's a lot of ideologies, and that's
mm,
why our, being very um, attached, or being very identified with an ideology that creates that, righteousness, that
mm,
creates, that's coming from all different levels, and
mm,
all different, not levels, but all different perspectives. So when we look at activism, I feel we have to include that if we're really going to transcend it, if
mm,
we're really going to evolve past it. Um, and that's a big picture which can pull us out of, well, what about today? So it's a really tricky one. It's
mm,
tricky, all the nervous systems, all the people, how we've been brought up, all the different ideologies. it can very feel, even as I speak, I can feel how overwhelming it is. And
Mm,
that for me is why I have to come back inside, why I
mm,
have to sit with that overwhelm first and see how I can move that in my system. And then with the anger that I might feel, which I can finally feel, but now can I put words to it?
mm,
But then and meet the fear that if I speak that, I may get like I may stir someone's nest, disturb someone's nest, or I might there might be violence towards me. Like those are all very lived experiences these days. You know, even coming on here to speak about this, I had a level of threat in my body I had to sit with before I came on here
mm,
because it's scary for me to speak personally,
mm,
you know. And so, but I want to practice it more. I want to speak. So I have to not let that fear have me.
mm.
If that has me, then I'm just, well, not unjust. If it has me, it has me. But
Yeah,
can I take action in order for that fear not to have me so much that
mm,
I cannot speak
yeah,
what needs to be said?
yeah, 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 yeah. That's the invitation. And like you say, everyone gets to decide for themselves what is the right or wrong, or we're each on our own journey. Uh,
Yes.
I, I,
And
and go on.
the more perspectives we can take and allow within us
Mm,
will allow us to take more perspectives around us. And for me, that's the change we have to make.
mm,
Not that the perspectives, a perspective that I might disagree with, I'm not just going to sit there and go, yeah, you're right. But like, okay, can I listen to that perspective? Can I understand that maybe that came from somebody has a very different lived experience to me? And
mm,
as I sit with that, something starts to change rather than I react, rather than
mm.
I send a text or I put some comment on someone's Facebook or whatever that just again perpetuates what we're trying to respond to.
So again, you're leaning into this idea of being able to sit with what's moving through us before we react.
Yeah,
And
before
yeah,
we take action.
yeah,
And to me, that's leading with the feminine in acting with the masculine. The feminine is relational, includes, um, is willing to feel that the feminine part of us, whatever gender you are, can we tether our actions, because our actions will actually arise out of that if we stay in relationship,
mm,
if
mm,
we are willing to be present to our feelings, if we're willing um, to include rather than
mm,
us and them,
mm,
other.
mm.
It's very challenging. I mean, it's not easy.
No, it isn't. And it's an interesting piece. And I'm just thinking now in terms of the whole conversation and, in these pieces. And obviously there's the caveats around it in terms of, there's an interesting piece around that idea of taking time, of being still, of turning in. And we live in a culture that often, and being yoga teachers and, being in that world and of people not want, and particularly running men's retreats where there's a real guilt around self-care, around this, it's seen as a luxury. And yet we're probably getting to a point and probably going to go deeper along this track in which there will be so much chaos, and there is so much chaos, that unless we're actually attending to that inner landscape, like actively participating in our inner landscape in some way, as opposed to just being run by it, then our potential in terms of showing up, even from the basic, for our own happiness, our own joy, our own possibility, our own, being able to wake up and have a sense of life as being more than holding potential, holding possibility, of a sense of some sort of richness within ourselves that is there waiting to be experienced. And yet so much of it is, like you said, is a peeling away, is a beginning to look at the paradigms we've grown up in, and how we extricate ourselves, how we begin to take stock, how we begin to witness ourselves first and foremost.
Yeah.
Because I suppose everything we're seeing in the exterior world, like, there is this idea of how it is a reflection, how, the us and them, and and that's obviously a weapon that is used. Of course, no one's condoning, like, so much of what is going on in the world is abhorrent and needs to be spoke. I feel certainly I need to speak up about it, and so many people do. But the precursor to so much of this work is this piece of turning inward.
I think it's part of the dance. It's precursor, yeah, but as I say, if you stay only on that side of the street, we
Yeah.
will become passive. We will bypass. So it's a dance. It's that in as I
Yeah.
work with in the wheel, it's like the seasons. It's like there's a time to sit and regulate my system in order, not so that I can be peaceful only,
Mm.
but in order that the wisdom to enact comes from that place. And that has been my experience. I see Regina O'Connor on this here, and like for the first whatever year and a half, 2 years, I spent my of when Gaza happened, and that the genocide began. I really was trying to see what, holding that question, how do I respond? How do I respond? And I knew, I found as I sat and I withdrew and then got the wisdom to just actually work with the women who are on the Celtic wheel. That's where I can impact. That's where I can bring my pieces to it. Um, but then suddenly, whatever, 6 months ago, I got I can't remember how it even happened, but suddenly I was part of a group that were organizing a song for Palestine on the streets, and that came out of the waiting, um, the doing what I could do, and then a much bigger, what looked like a bigger a piece of enacting, or activism, in the old sense. Um, and it was the most magical, most incredible journey of a team of people, a group of people that came together, and really, it was a pure joy to organize that. Like, it was effortless. There was so little. Um, yeah, it was just effortless, and so that's my sense. If I'm making any sense, is that the more that we pay attention to what's happening internally, and let our actions come from the depths, something that has an effect on the exterior as much as it does on the interior. And that may sound woo-woo, but it is absolutely my experience that both, that as I shift my state and bring my state into um, one of something that is wise and generative, rather than just reactive, or feeling like I have to do something. I'm doing it out of, like, oh my God, because people are telling me I should do it.
Mm.
That's the sovereign piece. Come back, come in, find your own wisdom, find your place in this, because everyone has a place that feels this and is questioning this. Find your place and stay in your lane, and you will take wise action, wise inspired action
Mm.
that I believe will bring and is birthing a new world.
Mm. So everybody has a role to play.
Mm.
And then we're back to this piece of, like, real sovereignty, a real deeper sense of, who am I? Who am I? This.
Mm. Well, for me, sovereignty is like I am the highest authority in my life and not just I'm the highest authority. And I stay open to other perspectives.
Mm.
So I'm willing to be changed by what I hear, but I'm staying in tune to what is my inner depths, which is my soul for me, my higher self, whatever you want to call it, that's what's I constantly listen to, but not in isolation. I will also listen to people who don't agree with me, who I don't agree with. Can I stay so open as well as stand my own ground, but stay open to what's happening around me, to what other perspectives are?
Mm.
And that's
Yeah.
not an easy thing to do. I'm saying it as if I do it daily. It's
Mm.
I, you know, I, but that is where the wise action comes from. The I and the we,
Mm.
you know.
Yeah, like even in the with the men's work, it's such a huge piece of the journey. Obviously I work with men primarily, so that's and we all know the cliches around men and lone wolves and do it alone and like a lot of very ultimately very fear-based perspectives that we've attached onto and have just defined masculinity around them. And yet the experience 100% of the time by the end of 3 days together or 2 days together is this sense of that when we come together in right relationship, that magic happens.
Mm.
Magic happens. Like life becomes so much fuller and richer and it's one of those win-win scenarios. Just everybody wins
Yeah,
when we come together in those ways.
yeah. Until we don't,
Until we don't.
because that's life. Life is movement, and so that's the dance. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And we're all learning.
we're all learning, and
Learning
we're
steps.
we're at a frontier. We're at an
Yeah.
edge together, and like that's why we need each other, because it's we're walking a very untrodden path, and we're evolving. Activism and sovereignty and humans, are us as humans. We're evolving it all, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mary Kennedy.
Always a pleasure, Michael Ryan, even if I was kind of afraid in the beginning before I came on, which I was. I had genuine, oh my God, will I say the wrong thing, which
Mm,
is part of
mm,
this thing. Yeah.
And it's all welcome.
Mm.
It's all welcome. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But it's
Yeah.
scary
Yeah.
in my body.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks,
And
Michael.
thank you for sharing. And yeah, I think it's interesting, that I ended up choosing or four women to speak with, and I really have this sense of that wasn't the initial plan. Not that I had an initial plan. I was going to choose four people, but yeah, I feel a lot around what women are doing in the world, what you're bringing to the conversation, and how incredibly important it is, and how there feels like there's a birth of something through you women that's happening, that's a rekindling of a fire, and I think it's very powerful. It's very beautiful.
And yeah, like right back at you,
Thank
you're
you.
doing the same with men, and so many of us are doing it, and Sorrow, and Vivian. Like
Mm,
this is a great series of conversations, and a brave and courageous one too. So just a deep bow to them too,
for sure, for sure.
putting this. Yeah,
Yeah.
Sloan,
Sloan,
Corinne
you
Haka.
are. Yeah. See you guys.
Bye, everyone.